In 2017, Luanda, the capital city of Angola, beat cities like Hong Kong, London, New York, and Singapore to become the most expensive city in the world. What was very interesting about this ranking was that Luanda was the only African city amongst the top 20 Europe-dominated list. Since then, Luanda has become one of the most expensive cities in the world. Today, living in Luanda is not cheap, and you need to work extremely hard to keep up with the ever-increasing expenses. But the big question is, how did a city in a lesser-known country like Angola become the richest city in the world? Well, in this video, we will try our best to tell you what happened that made the city to become so expensive. But first, if you are new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Brief history of Luanda. Luanda is the capital and largest city of Angola, located on the Atlantic coast in southwestern Africa. Luanda has a population of about 9 million people, making it the fourth most populous city in Africa. The history of Luanda dates back to the 16th century, when it was founded by the Portuguese explorer Paulo Dias de Novais in 1575. The city was originally built as a fortress to control the trade of slaves and ivory in the region. In the 17th and 18th centuries, Luanda became an important center of the transatlantic slave trade, with thousands of enslaved Africans passing through the city's ports. The city grew rapidly during this time as Portuguese colonizers and traders settled in the area and established plantations and trading posts in the surrounding countryside. In the 19th century, Luanda became the capital of the Portuguese colony of Angola and experienced significant economic growth as a result of the expansion of the coffee and rubber industries. However, the city was also marked by social and economic inequality, with the vast majority of the population living in poverty, while a small elite profited from the exploitation of natural resources. Throughout Portugal's dictatorship, known as the Estado Novo, Luanda grew from a town of 61,208 with 14.6% of those inhabitants being white in 1940, to a wealthy cosmopolitan major city of 475,328 in 1970 with 124,814 Europeans, 26.3%, and around 50,000 mixed-race inhabitants, 10.5%. Oil was eventually discovered in Angola, and the first oil exploration well in Angola was drilled in 1955 by the Texas Oil Company, later known as Texaco, but it was not until the 1960s that significant oil reserves were discovered. In 1966, the Portuguese government granted exclusive oil exploration rights to the Cabinda Gulf Oil Company, a subsidiary of the American oil giant Gulf Oil Corporation. Cabinda Gulf Oil Company began drilling in the Cabinda region of northern Angola, and in 1968, it discovered the first major oil field in Angola, the Malongo Field. Following the discovery of the Malongo Field, other international oil companies began to invest in Angola's oil industry. In the mid-20th century, Luanda became a center of anti-colonial resistance as Angolan nationalists organized protests and armed resistance against Portuguese rule. In 1961, the Angolan War of Independence began, and Luanda was a key battleground in the struggle for independence. The war lasted for 14 years, during which time Luanda was heavily damaged by fighting and bombings. In 1975, the year that Angola gained independence from Portugal, the country produced around 87,000 barrels of oil per day. By the early 2000s, Angola had become one of the largest oil producers in Africa, with daily production exceeding 1 million barrels. After Angola gained independence from Portugal in 1975, Luanda became the capital of the newly established republic. The city underwent a period of rapid growth and modernization during the 1980s and 1990s, with the construction of new infrastructure, housing, and public facilities. The growth of Angola's oil industry has had a significant impact on the country's economy and society. Oil revenues account for the majority of Angola's export earnings and have been used to fund infrastructure development, social programs, and other government initiatives. How Luanda became so expensive. Before we dive into how Luanda became so expensive, let's look at a few indices to establish how expensive Luanda is. Housing. The cost of renting a two-bedroom apartment in Luanda can range from $2,000 to $10,000 per month, depending on the location and quality of the property. 1 kilogram bag of rice can cost around $9, while a 1 kilogram bag of potatoes can cost around $7. The cost of transportation in Luanda is also relatively high. due to the city's limited public transportation system and high demand for taxis. A one-way taxi ride within the city can cost around $15. Overall, the high cost of living in Luanda can make it a challenging place to live for many people, particularly those on lower incomes. The truth is Luanda hasn't always been an expensive city. A lot of factors made the city see an exponential increase in its prices. Some of these factors include: 1. Population increase in Luanda. Luanda has experienced a significant influx of people in recent years due to a combination of factors such as natural population growth, rural-urban migration, and immigration from other countries. The city's population has grown rapidly in the past few decades, from around 1 million people in the 1980s to over 9 million people today. One of the main drivers of this population growth has been rural-urban migration, as people from rural areas have moved to Luanda in search of better economic opportunities and improved living standards. This has led to the growth of informal settlements and slums on the outskirts of the city, as people have struggled to find affordable housing in the urban core. In addition to rural-urban migration, Luanda has also attracted a significant number of immigrants from other countries, particularly from neighboring countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. These immigrants often come to Luanda in search of better economic opportunities and may work in a variety of industries such as construction, retail, and services. The influx of people into Luanda has created significant challenges for the city, including a strain on infrastructure, housing shortages, and social and economic inequality. This large population demands became very high, and when demand is high, prices go up. 2. Booming oil industry. The oil industry has had a significant impact on the cost of living in Luanda in a few different ways. One of the main ways is through the influx of foreign workers and businesses associated with the industry. This has created a high demand for housing, goods, and services that are typically purchased by expatriates, which in turn drives up prices. Additionally, the oil industry has contributed to Angola's overall economic growth, which has led to a rise in the country's GDP and increased consumer spending. The oil industry has also had an impact on the cost of transportation in Luanda. The city's roads are often congested due to the large number of cars and trucks associated with the oil industry, which has led to longer commute times and higher transportation costs. Finally, the oil industry has contributed to the overall development of Luanda's infrastructure, which has led to increased demand for goods and services and higher prices as a result due to the fact that there is enough disposable income. Limited infrastructure. The limited infrastructure in Luanda has contributed to the high cost of living in several ways. One of the main ways is through the high cost of importing goods and services. Since the city's infrastructure is still developing, many goods and services have to be imported from other countries, which can be expensive due to transportation costs, tariffs, and other fees. The limited infrastructure has also made it difficult for businesses to operate efficiently, which can lead to higher costs for consumers. For example, power outages and water shortages are common in Luanda, which can disrupt business operations and raise costs for businesses that rely on reliable access to these resources. Additionally, the limited infrastructure has contributed to a shortage of affordable housing in Luanda, which has driven up the cost of rent and property prices. This is because the lack of infrastructure makes it difficult to build new housing developments, which has led to a limited supply of housing and higher costs for those seeking to rent or buy property. 3. Currency exchange. The currency exchange in Luanda has had a significant impact on the cost of living in the city. Angola's currency, the kwanza, has been devalued in recent years, which means that it takes more kwanzas to purchase goods and services that are priced in other currencies. This has made imported goods and services more expensive, since they are typically priced in other currencies, such as the US dollar or the euro. As a result, many goods that are not produced locally in Luanda have become more expensive, such as electronics, clothing, and food items. This has contributed to the overall high cost of living in the city. In addition, the currency devaluation has also affected the cost of traveling outside of Angola. Since the kwanza is worth less than many other currencies, it can be expensive for Angolans to travel abroad or for foreigners to visit Angola.